Okay, I think we can just start while while we wait for everybody else. Um, Hello and welcome to another week of urban design theory and urban morphology. Um, Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As you know, the first 8 weeks of this course provides you with insights into urban morphology before moving on to discuss urban design theories. This week, we'll be focusing on urban form and urban structure. Last week, I mentioned that urban morphology is the study of urban forms, how they change over time, and the drivers of that change. I also mentioned that a sound understanding of urban morphology uh, can help with can help with future urban design efforts. Um, Urban form, as the name suggests, it has something to do with the shape of a city, a shape which is not so apparent if we were to navigate through the city, but it's only visible from above. Now, why is it then? Why is it important then for us to observe urban form? Well, there are at least three reasons as to why it is important to observe urban form. There are practical reasons, there are cultural reasons, and then there are the higher philosophical reasons as to why it is important to observe the urban form. Now, for practical reasons, um, through the uh, through the detailed observation of urban form, both of the present and of the past, we learn both what we should do and what we should not do, and how we can do things better. This is clearly a fundamentally desirable objective in pursuit of a more successful and holistic approach to urban management. Um, in a situation where key decision makers and stakeholders inevitably approach issues and problems from their own highly specialist and therefore limited perspective, the importance of a more multifaceted approach, reflecting on the complexity of urban forms, should be self-evident, but a systematic demonstration of this is unfortunately lacking. Um, it is it is precisely the study of urban form that provides a much deeper appreciation and up to a certain extent a certain degree of training for closely related fields of practical application such as urban development, planning, architecture, urban management, and urban conservation. I mentioned a couple of these points last week as when I tried to demonstrate how the study of urban morphology ties into other built environment disciplines. In cultural terms, the study of urban form is analogous to fields such as art appreciation and the like. A full appreciation and understanding of a townscape may be close to that of a specific work of art. An understanding of urban morphology is therefore a prerequisite or a requirement to a fuller appreciation of the aesthetics of urban places. However, townscapes possess a deeper cultural significance in that they're not simply a subject to the gaze. It's not just simply something to look at, but a real reflection of or a real manifestation of a phenomena that is lived in a lived in phenomena. They possess a sort of life of their own, and in their built environment and the forces shaping this built environment, they represent the values, the local values, the genius loci, reflecting the nature of both past and present societies. And I think this rings true. I think this rings true everywhere, globally, be it in the eastern hemisphere, the western, northern, or even the southern hemispheres. Um, cities have cities are multifaceted um, organizations, so to say, and they're physical, and they are also physical evidence of what happened in the past, whether it be colonization or whether it be pre-industrialization, up to a period of industrialization and post-industrialism, and so on. So they are cultural artifacts, really. And so urban forms possess cultural and social significance that that maybe transcend the current functionality. And as such, they have layers of meaning. They have different layers of meaning, and many, and lots of significance attached to them. So in these senses, then in appreciation and understanding of the aesthetics and the accumulated layers of meaning, the study of urban form offers an added value to quality of life. Um, as with most educational endeavors, the study of urban form is concerned with trying to make sense of the world around us. So the analytical study of urban form provides us with the tools to undertake such a task. Um, this is something that I'd like to cover next week. The analysis of urban form. And so next week's discussion, the analysis of urban form, should help you with the task for this course. And so moving on to the philosophical side, or the philosophical reason why we should observe urban forms. There is, of course, a very wide range of philosophical reasons or philosophical positions that could provide the framework for such a study. Funnily enough, a recent study, as recent as 2016, revealed the relative weight attached in morphological studies to the physical, social, and cultural dimension of cities, and noted the substantial amount, or the substantial focus on the former. Urban morphology is in a unique position to integrate these aspects, the social, physical, and cultural aspects. And a key purpose of this lecture is actually to argue that the importance of the subject of urban morphology requires more attention being paid to the social and cultural dimensions. So not only are we dealing with the physical manifestation of these socio-cultural values and activities, but we're also dealing with the socio-cultural activities that actually take place within them. Unfortunately, urban morphology is only 8 weeks. It's only about 8 weeks out of the 8 semesters that you will be spending in the department. Hopefully, in the upcoming curricular revisions, I can extend urban morphology into a separate course, because there's actually a lot to talk about. So the urban morphology. So if you're looking for a general explanation, or a general description of urban morphology, it is basically identifying the distinct parts of settlements and their historical origins to explain the settlement's character, diversity, and complexity. And another explanation for urban morphology would be identifying the generative processes and and developmental regularities and perhaps even irregularities of human settlements. Um, and then, of course, there are the and then, of course, there's the environmental aspects or the environmental and operational aspects to urban morphology. Urban morphology investigates the physical composition of settlements and their characteristics in use for general explanatory purposes. And of course, studying urban morphology allows you to evaluate the environmental performance of urban form and helps you identify ways to improve performance through the co-modification or the modification of urban forms. In the strategic planning lens, urban morphology contributes to strategic planning and policy making, or contributing to the evidence base for strategic growth of settlements, devising and supporting planning policy. Design codes as well is one of the products of urban morphology. Design codes and guidance that undertake a detailed descriptive account of settlements and typological analysis for the purposes of development control. But that's all about the fundamentals of urban morphology and the philosophical meanings of urban morphology. I guess it is important to take a look at the history and the evolution of cities through time, to sort of I'm trying to illustrate the drivers of change, that shape urban morphology throughout history. So, and to do that, as always, I think as common practice, I've divided the time periods into pre-industrial and then industrial times. So pre-industrial cities, for millennia, the growth and shape of cities have really been constrained by the transportation technology available. For a long time, nothing could move faster on land than a horse. So, and most people run their errands on foot, by foot. So if we think of commutes for up to 1 hour as common now, we can obtain, if we think that an hour's commute, whether it be by horse or on foot, if we think that if we use the 1 hour as a common number to guide us, then we can obtain the maximum size of a walking-based city, or a walking-oriented city. The outer suburbs, I'm sure, can't possibly be further than 3 kilometers from the center, because our walking pace is about, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes per kilometer. So how many hours is that? That would be about 4 to 5 kilometers per hour. So 1 hour, yeah, around 3 kilometers from the city center. That would be the maximum distance of the outer suburbs. So for the same reason, the old slow speed city would also need to be denser. So any further than that, the speed constraint results in a city with only one center combining as many functions as possible, as travel between different centers would be too onerous in terms of time. Not everybody has a horse at that time. Most people traveled on foot, by foot. So that's why pre-industrial cities were generally very small. And most of them were rural settlements that surround urban space, and these rural settlements provided agricultural products to urban dwellers. who then turned it into different economic for different economic needs. Cities at that time were trade centers, gateways to foreign lands and markets. Um, and then after the fall of the Roman Empire, the pre-industrial cities experienced a decline in development. However, there is also pre-industrial colonial cities. There are also pre-industrial colonial cities. Sorry, and these cities are generally built and developed by colonizers in whatever land that it is that they conquered. Indonesia is a clear example of this. We have colonial cities, and we still build and develop our new cities. Well, not all, but some of our cities, some of our older cities that continue to grow and develop. They still grow and develop around the old colonial city. And some of the properties that some of the properties or the some of the properties of these pre-industrial colonial cities. Yes, I think some. Uh, Aji Said, do you have something to say? Okay, accidentally unmuted himself. That's fine. Um, so cities built by colonizers. They're characterized by the European imperialism that fueled creation. Um, they share common traits or characteristics with wide boulevards, classical architecture. But then again, these are if we talk about cities that were colonized by Europeans, um, then it's then points 1 to 4 is valid. Um, but point number 5, during pre-industrial times, the colonial cities uh, were constructed with the aim of extracting and exporting raw materials back to the mother country. So that's why usually these pre-industrial colonial cities exist along riverbanks or in strategic places where they can build ports, because that's what their purpose was, simply to help extract and export raw materials. Um, Still talking about pre-industrial cities, there is a term called the urban banana. Um, banana. Um, by the beginning of the 1500s, several cities were located in trade centers that extended from London to Tokyo, and these cities they sort of made a and these trade centers they kind of made a crescent shape. That's why they're called the urban banana. Um, and along these chain of trade centers, there's London, Paris, Constantinople, Venice, Cairo, Nanjing, Hangzhou, and Osaka. And so the urban banana resulted from both site and situational factors. Um, and then there's also the internal economic structure that needs to be considered when we talk about pre-industrial cities. Oftentimes, these pre-industrial cities, thanks to their trade activities with other cities, they have a diverse mix of economic functions in any given space. So there wasn't really that much of a distinction. Um, Zoning was a bit more fluid at that time. So it's not because zoning came with or arguably after industrialization. A little bit more on that later. So shops, markets, homes, government function, and government services, they were often jumbled together in one urban space, creating this sort of mixed environment, mixed development. However, there were still structural hierarchies uh, separated by wealth, and in several feudal European cities, they had guilds, and guilds led to an agglomeration of certain functions in particular areas of town. Oftentimes, oftentimes craftsmen or tradesmen of similar skills or of similar activities, they would agglomerate together, forming a guild and such. But this is a portrait of an urban banana, London in the 1600s. Um, as I mentioned, time. So within the city center itself, different functions. Um, other than the street networks, there isn't other than the street networks and physical structure of the city. Um, if you look at it function wise or land use wise, then there isn't really much of a structure at all, as in activity wise, because everything was just uh, a good mix. It's a good mix of everything. And then came industrialization. Um, one of the well-known terms of industrialization is the urban industrial revolution. Now, it is good to keep in mind that in the 1800s, only 5% of the world's population lived in cities. Nowadays, after in less than 250 years, in less than a quarter of a millennia, more than 50% of the world's population live in cities. Um, the urban industrial revolution also led to the diffusion of industrialization, um, and the diffusion of industrialization is largely responsible for urbanizing the world's people. Unfortunately, this diffusion is does not mean equal distribution of does not mean equal distribution of opportunities and ultimately wealth. In Europe, the Industrial Revolution is very closely related to imperialism, and that triggered the diffusion of city growth. Um, and urbanization sort of grew in a snowball process. Growth of factories and urban jobs attracted rural farm workers. The farms and rural areas were became no longer became attractive to work in. People started moving in droves to cities, and so most of the European Industrial Revolution, it is arguably started in England, but it is most observable in England, and most of the records of the European Industrial Revolution is about England. So, and this growth created a steady rural-urban migration pattern, and England's urban population was only 24% in the 1800s, and by the turn of the century, or by the turn of the new millennia, it reached almost 100%, so 99%, 99% to be precise. So industrialization also led to the second agricultural revolution, and this agricultural revolution was created or was initiated to support the pattern of industrial and urban growth, and that led to more efficient and more productive agricultural practices, and that led to more and more workers moving to cities for jobs. Um, and because of the agricultural revolution, um, they experienced improved food supplies. Um, to help and to support an increasing population. So so industrialization led to a boom in the volume of production, and that of course induced created an induced demand, and so sort of sort of created an induced demand, and that helped drive population growth. Um, that helped drive population growth as well. So the industrial city. I think even before the 1800s, by mid 1700s, land-based cities were sort of started to fade away. Sea trade centers were growing rapidly, especially in Eastern Europe, St. Petersburg, and by the early 1900s, most of the world's great cities were either American or European industrial cities. Say Manchester in England, Chicago, Illinois, Barcelona in Spain. There's another one from England actually. Sheffield is another one. And industrial cities have different functions. Had a different function from the pre-industrial city. Um, in the pre-industrial cities usually served mainly as administrative or religious, trade, or gateway cities. But um, uh, and their function was primarily to make and distribute manufactured goods. But industrial cities then became something else entirely. Um, Again, if we reflect on the snowballing urbanization that occurred, that also lended a hand to the creation or to the birth of what's known as shock cities. So the pattern of rapid urban growth and urban migration led to growing urban spaces that were overwhelmed by the influx of urban migrants or urban migrants. And as a result, as you can guess, slums began to emerge. Hazardous pollution levels began to increase because back then, nowadays we have industrial estates and factories are located away from the cities, but back then, during the Industrial Revolution era, factories were in fact in the city center, in the city core. Um, that led to deadly fires as well, and other unwanted behavior or activities such as urban prostitution and the exploitation of children for labor and for other things. And of course, this heavy urbanization, these shock cities, they became so unbearable to live in because of the pollution, because of the crime and whatnot. And people began to move away from the city centers, thus giving birth to suburbanization, or urban sprawl. So, examples of these shock cities were Manchester and Chicago, Illinois. Um, so Manchester grew from 80,000 inhabitants in 1750, and in just 100 years, um, its population more than quadrupled, I think, so to 500,000. And Chicago as well, 30,000 in 1750, 500,000 in 1830, and by the 1900s, population reached 1.5 million. So, because of that rapid growth, cities experienced strained infrastructure. So, mind you, these cities were still relatively compact and relatively had mixed they had relatively mixed functions within the urban center. Um, but already the infrastructure was strained, and it led to the diffusion of it led to the diffusion of urbanization into other developing countries. So currently, the highest rates of urbanizations are occurring in developing countries such as ours. Um, Whereas in the more developed countries, the rate of urbanization has perhaps declined, has plateaued, or even perhaps slowly declined. Um, Urbanization in developing countries is usually characterized with the focus on one or two major cities with a very high degree of primacy rather than being spread out throughout the country. Have a look at Jakarta. Have a look at Surabaya. That's the kind of major cities or primary cities that's a prime example for point number two. And of course, because of such high rates of urbanization, um, cities such as Jakarta, Surabaya are facing the strain or the infrastructural strain. And large migration streams of young adults moving from rural areas to urban areas also add to the strain. Not only does it add to the strain of the city, but it also adds to the strain of the regions or the rural areas that they left behind. Um, as a result, we have many squatter settlements. Since many migrants are unable to find housing, um, they may then decide to build squatter settlements. Um, I think the United Nations estimated that 175 million lived in squatter settlements in 2003. That data needs to be updated, I'm sure. The numbers are no longer accurate, since that's almost 20 years ago. But nevertheless, that still rings somewhat true. To this day, I suppose, we still have issues with squatter settlements and the like. So squatter settlements are basically makeshift, unsafe or unsafe housing constructed from any scraps of materials that they can find on the land, and they are usually built on land they neither rent or own. Um, we need to make a distinction between squatter and slum settlements. Squatter settlements are basically illegal settlements, and they usually take the form. They usually manifest in the form of slums. But slums are not necessarily squatter settlements. So people living in slums may actually own their land. They may actually have the deeds or the title to their land. It's just that their living conditions are below or substandard. In several parts of the world, squatter settlements are called many things. Um, in Latin America, favelas or barriadas. In Indonesia, Indonesia, and the Malay-speaking countries, they're called kampungs. But again, kampung, like squatters and slums, kampungs don't always equate to squatters or settlements. They may have started out as squatters, but I think in most of the old kampungs that you find in, say, Jakarta or Surabaya, these kampungs have been institutionalized and they've been regulated in such a way that their living conditions are a lot better than they a lot better. Thus, they fall out of the squatter settlement category. So moving on to urban structure, and when we talk about urban structure, it's really difficult to not talk about urban systems as well. For those of you who were late to join, um, you may want to mark your attendance by scanning the QR code that you can see before you. Otherwise, the QR code is also going to pop up again a little later on. So, urban structure. Um, I do often question the purpose of spatial planning, and every now and again, if I revisit, whenever I revisit the definitions of spatial planning, um, I guess I always arrive at the conclusion that the purpose of spatial planning is to influence the development of the physical or the spatial urban structure in a way that is favorable for society. Now, in this context, the physical or spatial urban structures apply to one, the geographical distribution and the fabric of the building stock or the pattern of development. Two, the mutual location of different functions, such as residences, workplaces, public institutions, and public services within the building stock or the pattern of location. So we have development pattern and location pattern as two aspects to observe urban structure. And then, of course, the transport system, such as road networks, public transport provision, and parking conditions. They also determine up to a certain degree. Actually, the transport system or the transport network. I'd like to compare the transport network as the lifeline or the lifeblood of the city, because it does resemble our own transport and distribution, our body's own transport and distribution networks. And then water, sewage, and energy supplies and telecommunication systems or utilities, and the green and blue structures or the urban blue and green infrastructures, more or less referring to natural areas within and close to the city, such as lakes, rivers, and creeks, and parks and open grass fields and such. However, if we look at the very foundation or the regulation that becomes the foundation of spatial planning in Indonesia, Law Number 26, 2007, on spatial planning, we do get these three definitions. So spatial planning is the manifestation of spatial structure and spatial patterns. So now we are introduced to two new terms other than spatial arrangement or spatial planning, and that is spatial structure, or the arrangement of various settlements and the network of infrastructure and facilities that support social and economic activities, and then spatial patterns, or the distribution of land uses within a region, and to maintain a balance of protected areas and cultivation areas. I just need to state that we do have two broad categories of space within our spatial planning framework. The protected areas, which speak for themselves, I suppose. These are areas for conservation, for natural conservation, and the amount of protected areas is always kept in check to make sure that we maintain a balance between the built and the natural environments. Whereas the cultivation area, or in our native language we call ruang budidaya, the cultivation area, literally translates into the cultivation area. means the proportion of land that is available for development, that we can dig up and build and so on. Um, Moving along, somehow, if we talk about a city structure or a town structure, um, I can I can safely argue that everyone knows how a town or a city should be structured, or everybody has a clear sort of a clear sort of illustration or image in their minds how a city should be structured. Wherever you look around the world, I think most towns, most cities have a very familiar layout, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in America, Africa, or Asia. All towns and cities are generally set out with some shops or a marketplace in the middle, a place for business, the business core, and then surrounded by homes. Larger modern cities naturally express this structure at many different levels and scales, from local hubs to international city centers. Um, it doesn't mean that all cities follow this sort of structure, but but the settlement patterns certainly follow this sort of template. So activity, and maybe over here or over there, there's another activity core surrounded by homes, and so thus creating this sort of agglomeration as such. Now, this structural template, you can refer to this sort of template as the natural town structure. It has been the case for this template has been the case for as far back into human history as recognizable as we have records, so to say, of any form of recognizable civilization. And so such structure has seemingly lasted the testing of time. So the layout endured across so many civilization and geographic regions for so long. Why do we have business or activity centers in the core, in the middle, surrounded by homes and surrounding it? Um, or why not have the shops on one side, and so that it's easy to access from out of town, perhaps even acting as an interface between townspeople and farmers, bringing food to the town? But the answer why this sort of template persists is actually quite straightforward. Locating or situating the marketplace or the business, the activity core in the center, um, or in the gravitational center, energy efficient form, or simply the most energy efficient configuration thus far. Now, to appreciate this answer requires further thought of the activities of trade and exchange, and of how various different elements of day-to-day human life translate into movement patterns and land uses with identifiable characteristics. So, and that brings me to a very famous model of urban structure called the von Thunen model. Now, the structure that von Thunen suggested is that the typical town is analogous to the land use patterns. Um, so von Thunen is an early academic in urban geography, and he developed this concentric ring theory, concentric circles around a town, which explained the use of agricultural land as you moved away from a town or a city. So the further you move away from the city center, the um, more agricultural activities sort of prevail. In von Thunen's model, the drivers behind the location of different types of agricultural production includes the value of the goods, often dictated by the degree of portability, how easy it is to move around, and the time it took to go off as in how long it takes for it to go bad, to turn to rot, so to say. It also dictated by the distance and the weight of goods that to inform the level of effort to transport the goods and the land area required to make the produce. Now, the output of this model typically put vegetable, fruit, and dairy production closer to the town, because they're the ones that are they're the ones that go off very easily, especially considering early cities or early towns may not have the luxury of refrigeration. So that's why fruit and dairy production close to the towns, the woods or the forests a bit further out, because wood production, timber, they're quite heavy to transport. And then meat production is pretty easy if you make it walk to the city itself. Um, and then arable farming that requires large amounts of space is the ones that are furthest out. So farmlands, forestry, and then these are vegetable, fruit, and dairy productions. Now, von Thunen's model, as originally conceived, um, strictly related to the surrounding countryside and not exactly the structure of the town itself. In the next following slides, I'll try to show you some case studies um, to illustrate how urban structure and urban morphology sort of affects or impacts human life and human activities. So the first case study is the urban structure, regardless of the von Thunen model or the natural town structure, but just urban structure in general and how it affects or impacts travel behavior. Now, transport geography and transport economics theories suggest that the travel between different destinations is influenced on the one hand by the reasons people may have for going to a particular place, and on the other hand, by the discomfort involved when traveling to this location. So the destination itself is a reason, but to get there, whether it's comfortable or whether it's uncomfortable, affects our decisions to travel. Or in other words, travel behavior is is affected by the attractiveness of the location and the friction of distance, respectively. Now, the concept of friction of distance refers to the impediment which occurs because places, objects, or people are spatially separate. Um, I live on this side of town, you may live on the other side of town, some of you may be my neighbors, and so on. So if we were to go and see each other, the amount of effort for us to come together to a certain place is of course very, very different from one to another. If you live nearer or closer to the gathering point than me or our other classmates, then of course I'd have to exert a greater amount of effort than those who live closer to the gathering point. So that's the idea of friction of distance. Um, another way of saying, or another term for friction of distance is that movement involves a cost, whether it be financial or whether it be emotional or physical costs. So, by creating proximity or distance between activities and by facilitating different modes of traveling, the urban structure makes up a set of incentives facilitating some kind of travel behavior and discouraging other types of travel behavior. Still, it's people that travel, not buildings or geographical distributions of urban facilities. It's people that move from one building, from one urban facility to the other. This is a diagram that I took from Peter Nass's book. Um, he he argued that the cause of travel behavior includes individual characteristics of the traveler, such as age, gender, income, professional status, as well as their values, norms, lifestyles, and acquaintances. Um, The emerging travel habits are a result of people's resources, their needs and wishes modified by the constraints and opportunities given by the structural conditions of society. Simply put, um, simply put, if I were to visit you, or you were to visit me, then the then of course it's very easy. It's very easy to say, yeah, I'm going to visit you because I want to talk to you, or what, or I have something to say to you, and whatnot. But to get to you, or for you to get to me, um, your wishes, your plans may be modified by the constraints and opportunities given by the structural elements of the city. For example, yeah, I want to talk to you, but um, to go to your place, I have to take the number one bus and then transfer to the number three train, and then I have to grab one of those rental bikes to get to your flat, for example. So that's a sort of constraints that may alter your travel behavior. In the end, you know what? I just need to talk to you. So rather than me coming to you or you coming to me, I'll just give you a call and I'll cancel that. I'll cancel my travel plans, for example. Now, among the structural conditions that I just mentioned, the spatial and the physical urban structures, of course, may they make up only a few out of several categories. But for urban planning, these very structures are of actually they're actually of particular interest. So here we have the actors' resources, needs, and for example, I need to talk to you between our needs and wishes that affect our transport behavior. Um, the amount of transport we take. Uh, is it enough to just take a bike, or do we need to take at the macro level by social factors, level of affluence, prevailing values, social class maybe, and then the geographical distribution and design of buildings, mutual location or functions within the building stock, and then of course the transport system itself, road capacity, public transport service, and parking condition. Now, it doesn't make sense for me to come to your place. You got no parking, for example. Or it doesn't make sense for me to drive to your place because you have no parking, and so on. Um, One theory, I'm just going to introduce you to this concept for now. One theory illustrates the structure, the, the urban structure, travel behavior dynamics rather well, if I may say. Um, So allow me to use this theory to explain the connection between structure and travel behavior with other planning theories. Shorter traveling distances and lower proportion of car travel among inner city dwellers found in many empirical studies have, in particular, been explained by the high concentration of workplaces, shops, and other facilities traditionally found in the historical urban centers. There are several reasons for this sort of concentration to emerge. Um, the German geographer Walter Christaller um, suggested this central place theory, um, and his central place theory offers one of these explanations. Um, Christaller argued that the size of the population base necessary for retail and services to run profitably varies between different types of services and commodities. Functions like retail, health services, education, cultural activities, entertainment, etc., may therefore be graded according to the size of the geographical area usually covered by each facility. The different sizes of catchment areas form the basis for the development of a hierarchy of centers. Now, the largest centers include both highly specialized functions and functions requiring a smaller population base, whereas the lower level centers include only those types of functions that can survive with a small population base. But as much as I'd like to dive deeper into Kristalla, I've saved my notes. Um, I've saved my notes on central place theory for another time. However, I do have an excerpt of Walter Kristaller's central place theory spread out or spread about in two or three different books, which I think some of those references I have uploaded to Classroom. So go and have a look at the week two references folder in Classroom under within the folder called supplementary resources. There you should find the books that I'm talking about that has Walter Kristaller's explanation. So one article that I found, which is quite recent, by Wang and Debage, was written in 2021. Wang and Debage observed urban morphology and traffic congestion by analyzing traffic congestion data from traffic congestion data between 2001 and 2011, and they found that the shape or the form of a city does influence does have an impact on traffic and congestion. They found that polycentricity for both high intensity and low intensity urban land use were correlated with more congestion. Now, this is interesting because most of the times, or a lot of urbanists would say that we need to create polycentric cities. We need to create polycentric cities to diffuse growth, and to distribute opportunities and resources and whatnot. However, this sort of polycentric development actually has a very high correlation with congestions, and Wang and Debage highlighted that it actually causes more congestions. I've also uploaded their paper in Classroom in the supplementary resources folder. Then you can have a more detailed look at their findings and their conclusion. Contiguous with residential development was correlated with or contiguous residential development was correlated with less congestion. In other words, residential developments that are not leapfrog developments or that are not sprawl, residential developments that take place directly at the urban fringe, they actually correlate with less congestion because I assume that this is sort of transect development that then sort of encourages that sort of then encourages um a lower dependency on on motorized transport and a lower dependency on the road network or the road infrastructure to get to resources, so to say. Um, and then lastly, urban morphology exhibited a more substantial influence on overall congestion than rush hour congestion. Now, I think this is I think point number three is a key is their key finding, um, or a keystone finding, because when we talk about rush hour congestion, when we talk about rush hour congestion in terms of transport engineering, then we normally talk about trip generation and trip magnets. Um, those that places that generate trips and places that attract traffic or attract trips. And if we put those two together, or if we put trip generators and trip magnets along within an urban setting or within a city setting, then we also need to consider the size, the capacity of the road networks, and the capacity of the road networks dictate the trip ceiling. So, and during rush hour congestion, um, the amount of trips generated, the amount of trips generated is way above the trip ceiling, thus uh, overloading the capacity of these road networks and creating congestion. However, what Wang and Debage found out is that it's not it's not simply because of trip generators, trip magnets, trip ceilings, and road capacity, but it also but the way the city is built, the way the city is shaped, the way the city is structured has more to do rather than the aspects of traffic engineering. So I think that sort of highlights the importance of studying urban morphology even more. Um, Another case study, which I unfortunately wasn't able to download, and so I was unable to share with you for now. Hopefully the access to the library access is better in the next coming days. Um, is I found two papers on urban morphology and urban microclimate. One of them talked about urban heat islands and how the spatial configurations within a city influences airflow, and thus influencing the size of urban heat islands and the intensity of urban heat islands forming in built up areas. And the other one um, um, talked about passive cooling, and how passive cooling and the diversion of wind to provide thermal comfort within built up areas. Unfortunately, when I accessed those two papers last night, the PDFs did not load, and so I couldn't download them to share with you. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try again a bit later tonight. I think, because I'm actually curious, so I want to read those two papers myself. Um, Another one is urban morphology and business prosperity. Now, to a typical family in Southeast Asia, their house is not solely their home, but also a valuable basis for their livelihood, a home based business. I'm sure in other parts of Asia this is quite prevalent. This is quite prevalent as well in East Asia, for example. Um, I found a paper which like the previous two papers I was unfortunate not to be able to download, but I managed to read the full paper, and this investigation was conducted. This was an investigation into the relationship between urban form and home-based business prosperity in Vietnam. And this investigation actually revealed that urban forms frames a hierarchy of accessibility that relates to the different types of customer relationships, the frequency and the forms of customer contact required by various types of businesses. So, for example, households, household businesses that are located on the main street, they easily benefit from the abundance of economic opportunities generated by the good flows of both pedestrians and low-speed vehicles. Those and the houses that are situated on secondary streets, such as alleyways and laneways, they depend more on their on the business skills or the existing skills of the business owners, and also on regular loyal customers and smaller volumes of local traffic to operate their home-based businesses. Sorry. Now, these businesses are predominantly goods-oriented services with less direct customer contact required. Um, in very isolated locations, economic opportunities only exist for very specific businesses such as homestay hostels and lodging houses, which primarily serve price-sensitive customers, and some manufacturing businesses, particularly food preparation. Um, Once again, I'm going to try and see if I can download this paper tonight, because I believe that this is a worthwhile read, and it's worth sharing with you guys. So that concludes the main discussion for this session. Now, I'd like to discuss with you all our assignment, our group assignment. Um, some of you, if any of you happen to have had a look at Classroom, you may find that I have uploaded the term of reference for the urban morphology assignment. Now, since the way that this class, urban design theory and morphology, is structured, the first 8 weeks we'll be dealing with urban morphology, and then the rest of the semester you'll be discussing urban design theories with Buruli. So that means throughout the semester you will have two group assignments. One is a morphological assignment, which I will talk about right now, and the other one is an urban design theory assignment, which Buruli will formulate the term of references to. Um, so, your assignment for urban morphology is to conduct an investigation into urban morphological history and the structural features of a great Indonesian city. There are 6 cities to choose from: Manado, Yogyakarta, Bandar Lampung, Pontianak, Denpasar, and Padang. I have I tried as best I can to steer away from Java-centric cities, but somehow I managed to put Yogyakarta in there, but that's okay. Um, so the output for this assignment is an A2 poster showcasing your group's finding, and a 15-minute video presentation. Um, we we may not have the time to conduct live or direct presentations, as we only have 8 weeks of urban morphology. So I'm going to have to ask each group to make a 15-minute video presentation to upload either either to either to either to Classroom, or I might set up a Flipgrid page for you all to submit your videos in, either way. But allow me to talk a bit further on the term of references right now. So this is the term of references as sorry, just let me know if there's anything that is covering the term of reference. Otherwise, but this is the urban morphology term of references. As I mentioned, there are 6 cities to choose from, and I've provided their coordinates, latitude and longitude. To complete this task, I advise you to have a working copy of Google Earth or Google Earth Pro, and perhaps even an Illustrator or a mapping software, whichever one suits you better. You can use Google Maps for this assignment, but I believe that Google Earth and Google Earth Pro has more functionality to help you with this assignment. So your goal is to discover the major structural features of the chosen urban area and to construct a basic urban morphological history. The urban morphology history will help you better understand the drivers or the factors that affect morphologic changes throughout the city's history. So not only are you going to look at the city physically, but you're also going to have to research the city's history, the city's background, and what makes it the way it is today, basically. So you can just open Google Earth and then navigate to the coordinates that I provided, coordinates of your chosen city, or you can copy paste the coordinates into the search box, and then set an eye altitude of approximately 1 kilometer above the ground. Now, I've checked to make sure that the 6 cities that I've listed above, from Manado to Padang, I've checked to see that the cities have Google Earth imagery from more than one period, and you can use this feature to help you build that urban morphology history. So I'm not sure. I think from one location to another, they may have different time frames. So for Manado, I think for Manado they go as far back as 1986 or 1989. But for other places such as Denpasar and Padang, I forgot how far the historic records go. But you can use that feature to help you better understand. Maybe you found something of significance at a certain time period, and then you can roll back the map to that certain period of time and see if you can find a correlation between what happens and then what is manifested on the map. You should consider the general topographic layout of this area before you move on any further. So one of the major influencing factors is the topographic factors. They influence the map patterns that exist. So you don't have to construct a topographic profile of the area that you of the city that you choose, but you can choose to construct a topographic profile if you have time. Need to emphasize if you have time. Otherwise, you can just get a feel of the topographic feature. I think by moving your cursor around and taking note of the different elevations. Briefly outline the history of the map area and then identify factors that affect the morphology of your chosen city. To do this, you may need to examine the city from time to time using the Google Earth imagery and maybe some Google search will help. And then research the historic background of your chosen city. Play around with the Google Earth layers to help you with this step as well. And finally, identify the morphology of the city by tracing the city map. You don't need to trace the whole city. You don't need to trace the whole city, just the view that is displayed after entering the parameters in point 2, after you copy paste the coordinates and then you set an eye elevation of 1 kilometer. Whatever is in your screen, that's what you should trace. But don't forget, if you when you make this sort of map, don't forget to include a north arrow and a scale on your map to make it as accurate as possible. Provide a description of any major morphological features with as much accuracy and detail as you can. So explain with as much accuracy and detail as you can. Use proper urban morphology and urban planning terminologies, of course, to explain your area. So what you should then do is, after you've gathered all that data, you present them in the form of an A2 poster, and then you record a presentation of your findings. As I mentioned, you don't need to present in front of the class due to time constraints. If we can find time, then yeah, we can do a live presentation. Otherwise, a recorded presentation would suffice. Now, to help you with the presentation, you can create a PowerPoint slide deck, but bear in mind that the duration of the video must not be more than 15 minutes. However, I think if we use Flipgrid, the duration of the video can't exceed 10 minutes. So I might have to reconsider using Flipgrid as a submission platform. But yeah, that. So what you will be submitting is your A2 poster and the recorded presentation. You don't have to submit your PowerPoint slides, just the poster and the presentation. Throughout the next 7 weeks, you are encouraged to consult with the course coordinator, me, at least once before you submit your work. But we have 7 weeks, so I hope that you would consult with me more than once. But please be mindful of working days and working hours when contacting me. So all groups for the urban morphology task should consult their task with me. And then for the second half of the semester, for the urban design theory task, you will consult with Guruli. Since I've set up the groups in ITS Classroom, not everyone has to submit. Just group representatives. Just representatives from each group should submit the poster in PDF file format and the presentation recording in an MP4 format to our classroom, preferably by week 7. because on week 8 we will have a mid-semester mid-semester exams. And I think that concludes the term of reference. If anybody has any questions or comments regarding the course contents today, and or the term of or the assignment term of reference, you may unmute immediately. So, the assignments have been made clear, or maybe you don't have a question for me yet. Okay, for consultation, this is something that I forgot to put in the term of reference. For consultation, I would advise. I know some of you have my number, and I know some of you can, and I know that some of you can contact me through WhatsApp. But for consultations, you can make an appointment with me using WhatsApp. But please do not send your draft through WhatsApp, because it it will get lost in a deluge of other messages. So you make an appointment with me through WhatsApp, but before you make an appointment with me, send a draft of your work to my email address. And don't forget to put in the subject line. Don't forget to put these words in brackets. Put assistancy in the subject before you say anything else, or put these words in the subject. That way, Outlook will automatically organize or automatically divert your email into my consultation folder. Then it wouldn't get lost. Under a sea of other messages. Right. So, have I made myself clear? Is everybody clear on the task? No? Okay. Yes? Somebody unmuted.
Sir, I think it's clear.
All right. Maybe it's clear for now, but have a read through the term of references once again, and then if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to send me a message through WhatsApp, or send me a message, or send me an email. But don't forget the keywords asistency and bimbingan or bimbingan in the subject heading. Okay. If that's all cleared up, say we'll return to this for a bit. For those of you who may have forgotten to mark your attendance, please do so now. But otherwise, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me in this week's session. I look forward to talking about urban morphology analysis with you all next week. So stay safe, everyone. Have a great day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a great afternoon.